Okay, so that's us on air. This is Ronnie, and we're joined today with Professor Rosalind Graham. We're just going to wait for the first five or so minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, for people to join, and for people who are watching on YouTube to sort of get ready. So anyone that is going to join, if you're joining through Google, then please, I would ask you to mute yourself or mute your microphone for the first part. If you wish to speak, then you can join the conversation. But what I would ask you to do is use the chat function. So if you're on your Google Hangouts, you can go to the panel on the left-hand side, and the top icon on the left is the chat function. You can open up the box and you can leave questions in there. So we're just going to wait a while for people to sort of filter in, and then we'll go into the Hangout. So I've left some links if you wish to let other people know that this is happening. Then there's 2 links in the chat function, in the chat box, the group chat box, and you can share those links with anyone you like. Right, okay. Anything you'd like to say to anyone out there before we really get started, Rosalind?
Well, just for anyone who has joined us, thank you so much for doing so. I'm really looking forward to hearing from the listeners and what questions they might have, and knowing if there's any way that I can be of help to contribute something that's going to add to the clarity of the raw vegan movement and the natural hygiene movement. Just to connect, it's a great thing to connect and to know that there's other hearts out there and trying to do the best thing, as we all do.
So is that your aim for tonight, really, is just to try and give that's a thought that's come to my mind recently, is clarity.
Yeah.
If me personally, if I'm giving information, it should be clear, and it should be so how do we reach that? What's your thoughts on that?
I think that primarily there has been numerous challenges for years within, as I say, the natural hygiene movement, the raw vegan movement, because so many enthusiastic people had access to various forms of media or books or magazines or whatever, where they can express their views, express their personal experiences, their excitement over the things that they're discovering, and the conclusions that they've come to, some of which are brilliant conclusions based in science, and other ones, unfortunately, are based on a lot of enthusiasm and an elaborate imagination.
Right.
And so we do end up, and have done so, in a situation where there's a lot of information flying around, a lot of it flies in the face of the next bit, and so on and so forth, and it leads to tremendous confusion.
Yeah.
I think there are a very, very high percentage of the people who are involved in these sorts of lifestyles. They want to embrace the lifestyle, they want to get it right, they want to experience superb health and everything that such changes promise, and yet they also have the rest of their life whereby they are focused on their own career, their own professional track, and it likely is nothing to do with nutrition, lifestyle, or anything else. It could be anything from programming computers to dress designing, to any other thing, and therefore they're limited in the amount of time they can spend on personal research and personal sort of resource gathering to try and ascertain what is the truth, what is accurate, what is an assumption, what is based in science. And so for so many people, the quickest thing to do is to just go to a festival or go to a website or go to a book and try and absorb it all really quickly so they can apply it, get the results, and get on with their own life. Now, my position was such that I decided to make my entire life's mission, if you like, my career, my professional direction, into learning about these subjects, into getting educated in the sciences and finding out, you know, the path whereby if things conflicted, if one person was teaching something and another something else, I had the time and the available resources to really dive in head first and find out for myself. You know, hours and hours and hours of book reading and attending seminars and so on, way beyond the amount of lifetime somebody else probably has available to do such things. I, as I said before, I'm a woman of simple mind, and I embrace things on a very simple level. I don't like getting bogged down in analysis paralysis and endless depths of science that, quite frankly, is nothing more than something written on a piece of paper and is a little practical use. I like to talk basics in the kitchen, in my heart, in my emotions, in my life, in my moral structure, on very simple levels, because I think life is so easily becomes too complex and too confusing and throws us into a spin.
Excellent.
So putting those two things together, I guess the thing where I try to come from is to have had the opportunity, the time, the resources to delve into all that complicated stuff, but then my joy is to simplify it and bring it in my own humble, simplified way to health seekers, so that it's in a way they can absorb it, understand it, and apply it.
So for those that are just joining now, we've not quite started yet. We're just going through a pre-introduction really, and if you wish to ask a question or comment or anything, there is the chat box over on the left hand side. You can open that up. If you go to the left hand side, there's an icon at the top and it says chat, and you should open up the box. What I would also like to do is, anyone who has joined, who's watching, if you'd like to share this with other people, I'd appreciate it if you send out a link on social media or an email or whatever, and send this to your friends or network and anyone else you think that might be interested, because we're just about to fully get started, and I can already see people have started are watching us now. So as I'm saying to anyone, feel free to use the chat function. If that's not working, you could always send an email, I suppose. But it'd be easiest to just chat. If anyone actually opens up their camera or joins in the chat, I would ask you to mute yourself so that there's not like an echo coming back and that kind of problem. But if you do wish to speak, then we can hopefully add you to the call and you can speak. So that's 10 minutes in. Let's get started then. So a little mini introduction. I'll read out what we've got here. One moment. This is a short version. Rosalind Graham, Professor Rosalind Graham, has been a raw vegan for nearly 3 decades. For over 25 years, she's been a leading light in the field of natural hygiene and healthful raw vegan living. Rosalind specialises in the nurturing of children and helping people heal from disordered eating. Rosalind is best known for her work in the field of emotional and psychological well-being. Her work is rooted in the promotion of loving kindness, compassion, and peace. So, for anyone else that doesn't know you out there, what's your story and how did you get to this place that you are now? How have you created this life for yourself, sort of teaching health, and what inspired you to get into this?
You know, when people ask this sort of question, what flashes through my mind is, well, have you got over 5 decades to listen? And I explain. My goodness, what a long journey it's been. It really has, and what a rich journey. As a child, I was born into a family which was totally mainstream in its eating habits and lifestyle habits. And I think my path began when I made my personal choice to become a vegetarian. This, for me, was a very profound beginning, because it marked more than just the fact that I was changing my diet. At that point, I suddenly became truly aware of what the word sentient meant.
Yeah.
And when I realized that sentient means to feel, to emote, to be sensitive to one's environment, and all of the things which we as humans know we are, when I realized that this truly was exactly the same for the animal world, it seemed to me nothing short of horrific that we should torture, murder, and consume other sentient beings.
Uh-huh.
And so it was like an awakening, if you like, that changed my whole approach to life. And so proud I was of making this major choice to vegetarianism that I was somewhat shocked when I went shortly afterwards to a vegetarian festival to find there were people talking about being vegan.
Right.
And of course, very rapidly a light came on, and I thought, oh my goodness me, of course, how dense of me. It has to be vegan if you really want to live a life of compassion. And so I made that change. But amongst all of this, throughout my formative years, I also went through tremendous personal challenges with my family background. And slowly but surely developed a really, really profound disordered eating problem. I was emotionally distraught on many levels, and it was food that I turned to as my prop, if you want to use that term, or my crutch. I swung from everything from being a bulimic to an anorexic to a compulsive eater, you name it. I had the badge, wore the t-shirt. I did the whole lot. And of course, the sad thing about these eating disorders is that the more distressed you become with the disorder itself, the stronger the disorder becomes,
Mhm.
because you are so dependent on your drug, on that which you turn to in order to deaden your emotions to the pain of what's going on. And so it goes round and round and round and round. Nevertheless, I pursued my vegan diet and lifestyle for reasons of compassion, and eventually was fortunate enough to pursue a very successful career in the fitness industry, exercise being one of my outlets for emotional problems. And from there, I gradually became aware of natural hygiene, and this possibly was one of the greatest gifts of my entire existence, because it was at this point I started to get a real true picture of the bigger scene, that it wasn't really just about food. And the nice thing at that point was that I realized how the whole food thing and the compassion thing and the ethic thing all married up together and made so much sense with something that was taking me, the only way I can describe it is taking me home. I felt I'd lost my way for so many years. I'd gone off on so many tangents seeking some kind of escape from a life which I found to be unlivably violent on so many levels. And so the whole thing came together for me in a wonderful, wonderful way. And that is why I feel so passionate about trying to promote natural hygiene for what it is, rather than allowing it to become drawn into the raw vegan world as simply another approach to the raw vegan diet. Natural hygiene is such an exquisite philosophy and lifestyle in and of itself, because it includes so much of what is in the deepest recesses of our hearts, which is the spiritual side of us, which is the compassionate side of us, and which is the side of us that ever since we were babies feels that need to be loved and to express and give love and to be happy and have fun and revel in the beauty of the world. And all of this is wrapped up in natural hygiene. Now, because within the natural hygiene philosophy and lifestyle, the raw vegan diet fits so perfectly, it's very easy for people to take the raw vegan diet out of it and leave the rest of hygiene behind.
Hmm.
And this is what saddens me, because I feel people miss out on so much of this exquisite approach to life. It has certainly been one of my life's greatest gifts, as I've said, but it also is something that has given me hope whenever I have come across a situation whereby I have felt hopeless. And believe me, in my life I have had times when I felt hopeless. And it's always been natural hygiene and that beauty within it that's brought me back to embrace life.
That's a fantastic introduction there. So
I feel
really,
very strongly, Ronnie, that
yeah,
there is so many dear people, so many dear hearts out there suffering in such a variety of ways.
uh-huh.
I feel also very profoundly moved by the work of Marshall Rosenberg and nonviolent communication.
Right, right.
If anyone who's listening to this hasn't investigated Marshall Rosenberg's work, I wholeheartedly encourage you to, at least give it a try and find out about it. Because one of the key points in nonviolent communication is that if somebody is behaving in a way that is undesirable, dark, hurtful, damaging, whatever you choose to call it, ultimately it is because they have one or more unmet needs, usually multiple unmet needs. I don't really believe that any sentient being is born with an evil heart. I know there are those out there who would disagree with me. But I think that humanity has become so estranged from who we really are, and so almost dragged into a cultural way of being which is depraved and which is focused on violence, revenge, lack of trust, materialistic obsession, all those things which, when you really boil them down to their essence, spell the words fear and insecurity and pain. And I'm sure those of listening to this may not recognize themselves to be any major degree of emotional discomfort. Of course, there are those who will, but many of them wouldn't, and they just think, well, life's going along quite hunky-dory. I'd just like to be able to run a bit further or lose a bit of weight or whatever it is. But the more we change our diets in such a way that they are no longer usurping our vital energies and draining our nervous system, the more we are returning to diets that allow all of those energies, particularly our central nervous system, our brain, to function maximally,
Yeah,
and our senses to be fully sensitive, it's
yeah.
then that we start to think, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And we start to see the state the world's in.
Yeah.
And we start to realize what an amazing amount of healing and change needs to take place. And that can be a very alarming realization.
So that brings us on really to talk about, what effect has diet maybe had on that in terms of the relationship between emotions, mental health, and food, and how that's all linked together, and also touching on disordered eating and food addictions a bit more. Do you think that these things, that the diet and stuff like that, changing has led to that, and what's your thoughts on that?
It's such a wonderfully big and rich question, Ronnie. I'm just wondering whereabouts on it to dive in on. There are, in my opinion, far, far more people with an unhealthy relationship with their food than most people would ever realize. I mean, I've worked extensively with people with disordered eating. It's something that I like to focus on with my work because I know the pain it can bring to a person's life. In fact, it almost brings tears to my eyes when I tell you how many people with disordered eating have used the same phrase. And that phrase is, I want my life back. It's a really major issue, and so many of our population is suffering in this way. Now, there is unquestionably science behind this. And many of you listening will probably already be familiar with this, but I'm going to just briefly touch on it for those who are not. So bear with me. Our nervous system is pretty good at multitasking when it comes to small jobs. But when it comes to major undertakings, it's not so hot at multitasking. Now, something that takes massive amounts of our nervous system's function and our mental function is actually digesting food. Now, you're probably thinking, well, hang on, I don't think it uses my mental function. I don't have to sit around there thinking, well, I must just squeeze this down my esophagus, or I must just, churn this over in my stomach. I know you're not thinking about this in your mind, but believe me, there are parts of your brain that you're not aware of that are very, very busy giving commands for all those things to happen.
Sure.
The same way that your nervous system and your nervous energy is massively used up in the digestion of food. So that's a big job. And another really big job is feeling emotions, is the creation of emotions in your body as a result of the thoughts that you're having. It takes up a tremendous amount of your mental function and the functioning of your entire nervous system, not to mention quantities and quantities of your nervous energy. Now, your body finds it very difficult to do both of these things at the same time, and so you either end up doing one very well and the other very poorly, or the other very poorly, and the other very well and the one very poorly. If you look at someone who goes through a bereavement, they may be so busy emoting and feeling the distress of this terrible tragedy in their life that they don't eat, or they certainly eat very little, because they simply don't have the available mental function, nervous energy, or neurological function to digest food whilst emoting so strongly. Take another person going through a bereavement, and it's different for them. They can't face the challenge of the bereavement. It's too much of an emotional discomfort, and so without probably realizing what they're doing, they eat more and more food so that they can be so busy occupied with that, there is no neurological or mental functioning left to feel the emotions with. Now, that's an extreme case, obviously, if somebody's going through a bereavement, but all through our lives, we are going to be experiencing uncomfortable emotions every day to some degree for one reason or another. It can be something major or it could be something minor, but distressing emotions have never been considered comfortable. And it's a natural thing for humans to always try and become comfortable or to alleviate discomfort. And therefore, all day long, on and off, we're going to be naturally seeking some way of wriggling out of this uncomfortable emotion, whether it's a big one or a little one. And lo and behold, the sort of foods that we have culturally moved on to eating are absolutely brilliant at being emotional analgesics. So the problem here is that if you don't realize that this is what is happening, you very, very quickly can develop not only an eating disorder, but a compounded eating disorder, because one of your biggest distresses is the fact that you've got an eating disorder. And so therefore, you're going to keep turning back to the food and back to the food and back to the food to try and get out of that uncomfortable feeling, that emotional pain. Now, I really truly feel, I really truly think and I really truly believe that for anybody who is suffering a significant disorderment of their eating, the only way out is on a raw vegan diet. And I'm really confident when I say that.
Well, yeah.
Now, I have worked with endless numbers of people, from, as I say, bulimics to anorexics to compulsive eaters, and it's the same all down the line. Anorexics do have a difference, and I will just share my thoughts on that just momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
As we come into this world, we incarnate effectively. Our spirit takes up residence in our bodies. And I have worked a lot with anorexics. And what I have discovered, which seems to be really consistent, surprisingly consistent, is that these dear souls have found life generally too distressing and have never really fully incarnated into their body. And for that reason, it doesn't matter how thin they get. They can be skeletal. They can be walking around almost ready to snap. They're so thin. And yet they look in the mirror and they still see fat. Because they look in the mirror and they still see the manifestation of a physical human body that they cannot emotionally cope with being present in. And the only time those anorexics will be satisfied that they're thin enough is when they look in the mirror and they see nothing. The way forwards with these people, again, is to just fill your heart with love, wrap it around them, reach out with every ounce of compassion that you have, and gently, sweetly help them step by step to incarnate into their body by coping with the pains and the emotions that's a natural part of the human existence. Mm-hmm. And as they gradually come to live inside their own body, they will gradually begin to find that eating can be a normal function. Mm-hmm. It's very hard for some. The worst possible thing that they can do is to go to one of these centers where they are punished for not eating, and things are taken away from them, like their clothing, which I know some centers do, because all this does is to reduce their self-esteem even worse than it already is, increase their pain, and increase their desire to look in the mirror and see nothing. I wish, one of my greatest wishes is to be able to someday sit down and write a book that's in my heart. And the title of that book is for people with any form of disordered eating, and the title simply is The Answer. Because I have searched for so many years for myself, and since worked with so many other people, and every time it comes back to the same things. The same path has to be taken to get well. And I hope one day that I'll be able to be speaking here and say, hey, my book's out. First of all, I have a little daughter of my own who deserves every second of my time.
Well, I mean, that was really some powerful stuff there. That was really deep, and I'm just thinking about when people go. I mean, I've heard there's been numerous discussions about when someone goes to a raw food diet, is cooked food addictive? Is it an addictive? Is it chemically addictive in some way, or whatever? And I think, and there's many people that say it isn't, or there's nothing wrong with it, or whatever it is. And I've started to think that you need to really manage expectations of people who are coming into the lifestyle, or who want to go on a raw food diet. And I don't know if you believe this, but I think a lot of people will find it hard to give up cooked food, and it will feel addictive, or whatever. What's your thoughts on the idea of it? Is it addictive? Is it the emotional numbing? What is it that people are drawn to?
Well, for certain, cooked food is addictive. But it's not because the physical body craves something that is destroying it, because the physical body is never set up like that. The human body is set up for survival. The addiction actually comes exclusively from the mind, but it is nevertheless incredibly powerful. What happens is that when you eat certain foods, it brings about a shift in your experience of life. Now that shift can be anything from feeling elated to feeling drowsy and laid back, to feeling excited, to whatever it is. It's a shift in your current experience, and it's an addiction, if you like, to the shift in experience that people feel. Mostly, if you eat a cooked meal, because it's been cooked, and the nutrients within it have been so damaged or deranged in so many different ways, it's massively challenging for your body to work away and sort out what it can salvage from the mess and what it can't. And so it's a much, much harder job for the body to digest cooked food. On a chemical level, I'm not talking about mechanics, I'm not talking about people who have lost the musculature of their gut, I'm not talking about people with Crohn's disease, I'm not talking about other mechanical difficulties with digesting raw foods, I'm talking about purely the chemical aspect.
And this isn't like a raw food hype thing, this is a scientifically...
What is really kind of fascinating and fun and frustrating all at once is the fact that so many people in the raw food movement talk about all this research and all these studies they need to prove that the raw diet is better, and all of these case studies they want to see, and where's the evidence. And the interesting thing is that this information has been out and available. A lot of it was even out there before I was even born. Right. Because if you go into the real nutritional textbooks, the scientific textbooks, the real good ones, you go back to those books who have been published and republished for decades, who are absolutely solid and sound in what they contain. You go to places like the medical bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia, and you pull out the advanced nutrition books, and it's already all there. The studies were done decades ago and repeated again decades and decades ago. We know what happens to the individual nutrients when they're subjected to heat. What we have missed out on is how we translate that to what we put on our plates in a meal.
Right.
And I always find it sort of frustrating but amusing to listen to pretty well-to-do nutritionists talking about, well, of course, if we subject this, this vitamin to heat, this is going to happen, and we all know that this happens when we subject certain, types of carbohydrate or proteins. And then the very next thing you say, well, what can you recommend that I have for my dinner? And it's a pile of cooked food. So, bless them. Somewhere there has been a missing link between the information that's been available all this time in these books and in these resources and in these scientific labs and what we're putting on our plates, Ronnie. Also, we do know that there's many things in foods that are very, very powerful shifters of experience. Cannabinoids, which are a direct relation to cannabis, theobromine, for example, and opioids. Come on. What's the drug? Opioid. Hey, that was a tricky one, huh? These are all there, right there in those grains and so on and so forth in that chocolate. And they're going to give you a hit every time. Every time it's going to bring about that shift, and one gets addicted to the shift. It's very, very hard.
And this process kind of happens at quite a young age. Well, obviously a young age for most people, because everyone's on cooked food. So, like I was saying to you earlier on, I was at a dinner and a comment was made. Someone is feeding their child, and the child is, a baby basically, and just starting to eat solid food, I suppose. And the comment was, you want them to eat what we're eating, So there seems to be, I guess, what I'm interested in, and you're obviously a parent, is people seem to have a lot of issues with trying to feed their child because they're trying to. I guess I don't know if that's just if children would always have problems eating regardless of what they're eating. I don't know enough about that, but it seems like a lot of parents have a real struggle getting their child to eat, and it's like a kind of a process of indoctrination or something, or I, I don't know what it is, but obviously, could you speak maybe a little bit about that, about
Sure.
if that's clear?
Um, my own daughter, bless her, her problem is when she's around other children is that they all want to eat her food. And you know, she brings out this lovely bowl, and it's full of, you know, lovely organic strawberries and raspberries and all these various things. And she's really, really likes her cucumber. You know, she eats at least one whole cucumber a day.
Yeah.
And so she sits there with this picnic, and we're with all the other children who brought their picnics, and every time it's the same. Suddenly, all these little fingers suddenly extend into, you know, into her food. They're saying, "Oh, can I have that? That's what I want. Oh, I want that. Can I have that?" And it's got to the point where I have to pack extra for her friends. There is a big difference, a really big difference between children who have never been fed the sorts of foods that can bring about such powerful shifts in their experience, and children who have been brought up on a standard diet. We also have to consider what unmet needs are we dealing with these children. Now, I think one thing that really causes me great distress is when I see these little children, these little babies, desperate to be breastfed. And the parent mother is instead encouraging them to eat food, cooked food, or suckle a cow via a little baby bottle, or other such things, and they're desperate. And it's not simply for the natural nutritional nourishment they get from breast milk. There is a massive emotional, psychological need in children to connect with their mother in that way. Now, of course, I have the greatest compassion for any woman who is unable to breastfeed, and I know that there are real reasons why some women can't, and my heart really goes out to them. And there are ways of trying to replace that intimate connection in other ways. But for most children that don't get breastfed when they need it, it's purely because of fashion. Purely because of what our culture thinks is appropriate, inappropriate, and of course, what are women's breasts for? There's a lot of that stuff that goes on in our culture as well. We need to get this sorted out, because this is where unmet needs begin. They begin that young. The amount of parents I see laughing when their child is crying, this is beyond my comprehension. You see young mothers out there, their children are crying and they're saying, "Oh, silly thing, ha ha ha," and they carry on chatting and making light talk and giggle and watch their children cry. Now, if a child's crying, it's because it's distressed. They do not have the manipulative intent of adults. They are not manipulative children. I don't agree with that philosophy at all. They cry because they have a need. They have a need for mummy to pick them up and wrap her heart around them and do everything in her power to find out why they're crying, not to just stand there and laugh with their friend. And I have seen this a lot recently. Several times I've been really, really quite shocked. This is unmet needs, big time. And of course, the answer to these unmet needs is apparently filling the child with cooked foods. Have you ever noticed when babies cry a lot, how often a mother will just put something in its mouth to stop it? And mostly it's addictive foods, cooked foods, grains, big time, which of course have so many of these undesirable qualities in them, such as the opioids and so on. So if you're dealing with a child who's already raised with unmet needs and raised on a cooked diet, it's really hard, because essentially what you're asking that child to do is you're trying to take away their emotional analgesic and to cope regardless at that age, when they just don't have the intellectual or spiritual resources to be able to cope with that level of inner pain without it being suppressed with feed painkillers.
Yeah.
So it's very, very hard. Now, on the other hand, if you have a child who is brought up with, say, an approach to attachment parenting, who is breastfed, whose mother is devoted to trying to meet that child's needs and nurture it with her heart in every way, and then they've also been raised on a raw vegan diet, you're going to find a completely different human being. And it's very hard to take the former and instantly place it on the diet of the latter. It is hard. And I think if a parent wants to change their child's diet from a mainstream diet to a raw vegan diet, the actual dietary changes are the smallest part of that challenge. The biggest part is that parent has to, in an exaggerated way, be there for their child emotionally. In an exaggerated way, because the mother has to become the emotional analgesic. Or the father, I beg your pardon, or the father. The parents have to be the emotional analgesic. I apologize, boys out there. I'm so used to talking with other mothers. We're always talking about mother this, mother that. I didn't mean to leave out the fathers and the partners, the male partners and the boys. But these children do need, if they're going to make dietary changes, they have to have an extra big serving of parental love and compassion to support their emotions.
I've heard a few people actually say they would not the people who used to be into raw foods or in the raw food community, and they've said they wouldn't recommend raw food for children because, and often one of the reasons is a child's stomach is quite small and you couldn't get enough raw food into that stomach or something like that for that child to grow. What's your thoughts on?
Well, my response to that is if you're trying to get an adult-sized meal into a child-sized stomach, then it's not going to fit. But children are going to eat child-sized portions for their child-sized intestinal organs in their stomach. Plus the fact that I do believe whatever diet the child is being weaned on, they do not go onto 2, 3, or even 4 meals a day. They have numerous meals. It's quite natural. You know, I mean, we've got some baby birds that have nested in our lovely nesting box here in our garden. Jessica watches them all the time. And they are repeatedly in, out, in, out, in, out, just feeding all day long. And yet once those birds are adults, they don't feed that often. And it's the same with a human child. When you say the stomach's smaller, the child is also smaller. Plus the fact it is more natural to have more frequent meals that gradually become less frequent as they get older. So I can't see, quite frankly, I can't see a good argument for that. And certainly in my raising of a raw vegan child, I've never had those problems.
Right.
So maybe I think one of the good analogies is if you think of what do you feed a horse? You know, is it natural to feed it the cooked grains and the compressed molasses and chunks of whatever it is in these cube things, and to give it some dried out hay, or is it better for it to be out in a pasture up to its knees in grass?
Yeah.
Well, the obvious answer is the second, because that's the natural diet of Equus, the horse.
Yes.
And it's like someone then coming along saying, well, that's all very well, but it's not very healthy for foals, is it? Shouldn't foals be fed this other stuff? And when they grow up, they can have a normal diet, a natural diet? I don't think so. I think the natural diet is the natural diet for the species.
Yeah.
And don't let's lose sight of the fact that there is no other creature on the planet that cooks its food the way that we humans do. There might be the odd troop of monkeys that do this, that, and the other with hot stones or whatever it is. But nobody cooks their food the way we do. No other species on the planet. But then no other species on the planet has mastered making fire. And there's no question that when you put food in a fire, it completely changes the flavor and intensifies some of the flavors. And, you know, no one's going to deny that some cooked food doesn't taste really, really good. It does. But it's also really, really unnatural and really, really bad for you. I say to Francesca sometimes, honey, do you feel that you miss out? You know, when we're other children, she's going to a birthday party tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is she going to miss out? You know what she says to me these days?
Mm-hmm.
She says, Mummy, I'm going to miss out on being poisoned. So I do have compassion very much so for those parents who are trying to change their child's diet to a more healthy one, and I know it can be really difficult. Ultimately, I think the parents need to be demonstrating in the first place that that's what they do in their family. Secondly, I think they need to do it in little small steps. Yeah, you don't just suddenly make big changes. Children don't like big changes because they're trying to get a grasp on what life is all about in the first place. They're trying to feel a sense of security, and even things like changing the color of the sitting room curtains can freak them out because that they've always been that color in their sitting room, and if you're going to change the color, they don't feel quite so secure that life's what they thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, their food is something that's very intimate to them, and you can't suddenly just wipe it out and completely change it because it literally pulls the rug away from under their feet.
Yeah.
So it's little steps wrapped up in tons of compassion and a one heaping load of good example.
Okay, well, we're going to go on and speak about home education a little, which I know is something that you're passionate about.
Gee, but not get me on this one.
Yeah, I just want to just let everyone know that this is a live hangout. We've got another 40 minutes to go or so, so if anyone's got a question, they can try and leave a comment on the video some way, or if you've got my email, you can send an email in. But also just to let everyone know that Rosalind's going to be speaking at the UK Fruit Festival in August. That's from the 5th to the 9th of August, and it's going to be 5 days of raw vegan I'm not sure, an immersion into the raw vegan lifestyle, into the 80-10-10 lifestyle. Both Rosalind and her husband Dr. Douglas Graham are going to be featured, the keynote speakers, I suppose, at the event. And if you're interested in learning more from Rosalind and obviously meeting her, you can come to the event, and you'll be teaching every day. Rosalind will be teaching every day, and you'll get an amazing amount out of that experience. So if you want some more information about that, the website is fruitfest.co.uk. You can go and register there, and I highly encourage you to come and learn, and it's the best way to learn and to make those changes. And we've got families coming, we've got children coming, so that's great. So yeah, just that website again is fruitfest.co.uk if people want to go and check that out. So you're passionate about home education, and what's the word for it? Was that what it's called? Home education?
Well, it's interesting because in the States it's referred to as homeschool.
Homeschooling.
Here in the UK, the home educators do not at all generally like the term homeschool because they feel that it's just like trying to mimic school at home. And they're not interested in mimicking school, they're interested in educating in a very different way.
Right.
Now, I'm not here to put down schools. That's not what I'm about. In fact, I'm not really here to put anything down as much as put things up. As far as home education is concerned, I think that a lot of people don't realize how available that is, what an easy option it's made for us in this country. I think we're very, very blessed that those in power have the foresight to realize how rich home education can be and how it can work in our community from so many different angles. I do appreciate that for some people, home education isn't an option for financial reasons or any other reason. And I think that, again, we're blessed with some really excellent schools. I will say, however, that for me, home education would always be my choice. Now, obviously, one reason is because if someone's going to be embracing a very different diet and lifestyle from mainstream, you need to be aware that if your child goes to school and it is known, which it obviously will be by the other children, that they are doing something very different, then you have basically drawn a target on their forehead for being picked on.
Right.
Sadly, that's the way life is. Ultimately, it's just a child's version of the same thing that adults do to each other. It's just that it's not quite so subtle. Children, just like adults, if they see somebody doing something completely different than they're doing, because we are a species who kind of needs to be gregarious and fit in with each other, either they're doing something wrong or the other person's doing something wrong. And they sure don't want it to be them, so it has to be the other person. And that's what it boils down to. So if your child is following a very different diet, very different lifestyle, please consider the implications for them when they're at school, because there could be a lot of emotional discomfort for them around this subject. That aside, I believe that children are very affected by their peers. So if a child is put in a classroom with 26 other children of a similar age, their views on life, their ways of being, of thinking, of behaving, of processing their world is going to be enormously influenced by those other 26 children that they spend most of their waking hours with most of the year. In other words, they are going to be raised by the parents of those other children, because those other children are the growing product of the influence they've received from their parents or guardians, as well as obviously the life experiences that they've had and their peers. But parental influence is enormous. Family influence is enormous. And if you don't mind the parents of 26 children, 26 sets of strangers whose values you have no idea what they are, you don't mind them primarily influencing your child's upbringing, then go ahead, send them to school. The other thing is that in the home education world where we circulate, there is a high number of children who have come out of mainstream education because of bullying. This is the greatest reason people leave regular school systems, is because of bullying. And bullying is not something that's just a term about children just being children. It's not children just being children. It's children permanently, potentially permanently damaging the psyche of another child. And I have run many, many workshops, emotional work, where I ask people to come up with the greatest distress that still sits in their heart. And so many of them, it's an experience that happened when they were at school. Usually from other children, but sadly also sometimes from bullying from teachers. And they carry it around with them their entire life. And it affects all of their choices. Bullying is a most horrendous thing. And of course it's a violent thing. It's all part of the violent side of society. And why does the violence come from? You guessed it, unmet needs. The more your child is around other children who have unmet needs, the more they're going to have to be the recipient of the violence that ensues, psychological or even physical. I have very strong views myself, personally, and I claim it as mine, about the subjects taught in schools and their value of a child who hopefully is going to become part of the solution on planet Earth as opposed to part of the problem. I had a very interesting time when I sat and read a book and it said, If there were no curriculums, if there were no classes, schools, pre-decided subjects that your child should learn about, what would you want them to learn by the time they're 21?
Mm-hmm.
And my goodness me, I thought, what a rich question. And I sat down and I thought about this at tremendous length. And ironically, so many of the subjects that I'd been drawn into believing were important slid very quickly down my ladder of priority.
Yeah.
And others rose proudly to the top. For example, how many children in mainstream schools are taught nonviolent communication skills? How many of them are taught any communication skills? How many children in mainstream school have as one of their primary subjects how to not only survive in this world, but to thrive? Or is it just about knowing what the date of the War of the Roses was? Now, I've actually created a subject for us that doesn't even exist, I've discovered. And it's our #1 subject. And I've given it a name that doesn't exist either. And that name is Thriveology. It's the study of thriving.
Mm-hmm.
How many children are actually taught the sort of things that we learn as adults from personal development books about how to be our own best friend, how to coach ourselves through emotionally difficult situations, how to really be there for somebody else who's emotionally distraught without compromising our own health and our own emotional security? Are these subjects taught in mainstream schools? I don't think so.
Yeah.
These subjects that I'm mentioning about are actually at the top of our own personal home education list. And I'm very proud to say that I am getting endless comments from people who meet our daughter on how incredibly understanding, compassionate, kind, and aware she is,
Mm-hmm.
which brings immense joy to my heart. But mostly for her, because I know that she's going to find it easier than most, even though she's taken the harder path. And I don't think that's because I'm anybody special at all, or that I've done anything brilliant, other than pause long enough to consider, what does she need to be learning about in her day? Does she really need to sit there and learn so much of this stuff that, quite frankly, apart from being useful when you sit an exam paper to prove to the examiner that you're capable of taking in academic information, serves no other purpose at all in her life? Don't get me wrong, she can read, she can write. Oh, she can read. You know how she ever stops? She writes beautifully and she's eloquent. But there are certain subjects that I haven't made a point of bringing to her attention because I think them, quite frankly, worthless.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly not of any use in a child who's hopefully going to be a solution, not more of the problem. Her health is another major issue.
Yep.
Children, for example, if you think of them in school, how much time do they spend sitting on their little bottoms on hard chairs? And how much of their time are they actually out in the fresh air, moving and getting sunshine? All three things are literally vital to the development of a child's body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're necessary for us as adults to be healthy, but as children, it's absolutely vital that they get these things in order to grow and develop properly. And yet, they have to sit on these chairs and face the front, and preferably don't communicate with the neighbour, and to do as they're told and put their hand up when they need the toilet. And of course, sometimes they're not allowed to go to the toilet because it's inconvenient for the teacher, so they're taught to ignore their body's messages and, if necessary, end up wetting their pants in front of the class and experiencing embarrassment, rather than following through on a perfectly natural function. Not all schools are as bad as that, I know, but
Yeah.
I've heard reports of some, and I'm very glad that my daughter doesn't go there.
Yeah. I love the word thriveology. I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. Hey, we should all embrace that. No, I don't mean to be here to put schools down, because I know that they do brilliant jobs. It's not the teacher's fault the children sit on their bottoms. What else are they supposed to do with them? They can't give each and every one of them a hands-on physical outdoor experience all day long.
Mm.
And I know that it's not the teacher's fault, you know, that the subjects that they're teaching. I mean, that's not their decision. That comes from further up the line.
Mm-hmm.
I think so many teachers do the most fantastic jobs and have brilliant in the creative ways that they do deliver their lessons. I just think that we've headed so obviously in the wrong direction culturally for so long now. I'm not talking about scientifically, where our experiments have resulted in the most fantastic developments and studies, and we're able to do incredible things these days, both in medical terms and all sorts of different terms.
Yeah.
But in actual humanistic terms, we're just going from bad to worse. I mean, we have bunny rabbits here, and we have some rescue rabbits, and I have to use newspapers as part of their bedding. But I can't let my own daughter help me in case she sees the pictures and the headlines in the papers. Violence, violence, violence.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to matter what paper you use. People donate you all sorts of different newspapers from my little animal sanctuary. But I can't expose my daughter to them, because if she looks at those and grows up with this, oh, well, that's just what it is and that's how it is,
Yeah.
she's going to grow up assuming that that level of violence is normal and natural, and that's just how it is, and she'll become part of the problem. I am not burying her head in the sand by any means. She knows these things go on to some degree appropriate to her age. But she does not constantly be surrounded by these things so that she becomes numb to it, or at least partially numb, and let the cooked food do the rest of the numbing,
The next thing we've got on the agenda is to discuss ongoing education as adults and searching for our own diet and lifestyle truths. We've touched on that a little bit. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about ongoing education and where to find those truths?
It's a really good question, Ronnie, and again, those people who are listening who feel a little bit lost amongst all this conflicting information that's out there in the whole raw vegan natural hygiene thing, I think that you have to be very careful where you get information from. Now, it's a natural part of the human psyche that when we hear something for the first time that's delivered to us as a truth, it registers in our brain as a truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody else comes along and tells us something that flies in the face of that so-called truth, it's very, very hard for us to ever disbelieve the first and start believing the second.
Yeah.
It's just naturally how we are as humans, because we have to have some belief in things in order to survive. Now, if you open yourself up to listening to everything everybody says and everything everybody writes or speaks or whatever, you're going to be coming up with so much conflicting information. I think the thing to do is to be a little bit discerning. In fact, I'm going to put my neck out here and say very discerning about where you go to for information. Now, if somebody's qualification is simply that they're passionately enthusiastic about their subject, as delicious as this is socially, it's a disaster intellectually. I think people need to be finding out where people are coming from in terms of their real understanding of the science behind what they're saying. And I think, I'm not literally deliberately doing a plug here, but in terms of scientific information and accuracy and so on, I really encourage you to read Doug Graham's book, 811, 801010.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to find things in there that will answer so many of your questions. It saves you going to the real big time medical bookstores around the biggest cities of the world and pulling out the advanced nutrition manuals and wading through them, having to look up every third word in the dictionary. It brings it to you in a way that you can understand. I'm not saying, and I wouldn't say, that my husband is the only man that knows what he's talking about. I wouldn't say anything so obnoxious or so inaccurate. There are others out there, and I think you need to go and find those people, but you need to do so in a very discerning way of drawing up your own little criteria that somebody has to meet in order for you to be willing to open your mind to them.
Yeah.
And that's got to be involved with the degree of scientific background they have them behind them, as opposed to just pure enthusiasm and a few years of experience experimenting themselves.
I think a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of books out there, there's a lot of information, and it's hard to find what's real. And still in the UK and anywhere, you'll get things on the news. There was recently something on the news, and it was research. You know, it was supposedly research showing that butter isn't as bad for you as we thought, and you know, all the information's wrong. 20 years ago, they told people to give up butter, and now they've worked out it's all wrong, and all this kind of stuff. And I was listening to this and thinking, well, no one's given up eating butter for a start. You know, I mean, there's probably a few more vegans than there used to be, but it's just amazing to me that kind of information gets out there. Simply, it seems because it's what people want to hear, rather than it being. I mean, the nutrition studies and things. It's as far as I'm aware, it's thousands and thousands of studies on to show saturated fat, for example, and the damage that it causes in saturated animal fats, and yet this confusion still gets out there because people are selling books with a contrarian approach or a different opinion.
I can't remember who it was, Ronnie. It could have been George Bernard Shaw, who said there are 3 types of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. But I'd like to add one more onto that. I think there's 4 types. There's lies, damn lies, statistics, and advertising. Ultimately where I'm coming from, Ronnie, on that is I tend to go a little bit deeper into, as to say, what really drives me. And that is that if the world were primarily driven, or when I say the world, I mean westernized culture for sure, was primarily driven by love and compassion, and money came a poor second, suddenly the murky water would become crystal clear. But very tragically, because in our culture, money, apparently, is more valuable than love and compassion, our water remains a murky mess of confusion, including when it comes to nutrition. And the way to change that and to shift it around so that we become a culture based absolutely primarily in love and compassion is we have to stop emotionally sending ourselves to sleep with the foods that we eat and the lifestyles we live. We have to shed that dependence and break out of it and free our hearts and the clarity of our minds. And then it'll swap over, and then compassion and love will be the driving force. And then such advertising and such perversion of research and so on and so forth simply won't exist, except amongst the very few.
Okay, we'll move on to a question that came in, which was about soil quality and that kind of thing. So I guess it's a question you've got a lot, but with the way that food is grown now, is a raw vegan diet sufficient, or is the deficiencies in the soil leading to a situation where supplementation is required in some way?
Right. Yes, I understand the question, Ronnie. When we look at our home, Mother Earth, our planet, unquestionably, we have done immense amounts of damage, a lot of which is irreversible. And one of the consequences of that damage is depleting the topsoil that we have. But I do make an emphasis of saying topsoil, because do bear in mind that if you are looking at fruit trees, their roots go way down below the topsoil.
Yeah.
And so the nutrients they are drawing up to incorporate within their very own structure are not coming from topsoil.
Mm-hmm.
Now, admittedly, it does with vegetables. Vegetables tend to be planted and growing in topsoil, but fruit trees are not. And so if you're primarily getting your calories from your fruits, you're going to find that topsoil is neither here nor there for you, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It's much, much lower down. Even if there are, which I think there are, issues with depleted topsoil, what is the other option? Consuming animals that have been grazing on the grass that grows in the topsoil? You think they've got better nutrients inside them?
Sure.
Or, eating the grains that have been growing, again, rooted in the topsoil? Are they going to be better? No. I think there is an issue with a lack of sufficient full nutriment of all topsoils, absolutely. But I don't think, sadly, going to the grains or going to the dairy or going to the meats or any other thing that effectively comes from the grasses or the grains or whatever, or the vegetables in the topsoil is the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to help anyway. It's a problem for everyone, whether you're a raw vegan or whether you're a carnivorous grain eater. It's basically the same problem for all of us. So it's not a case of, well, if I went on a mainstream diet, I needn't worry about topsoil depletion. Mm-hmm. You can't escape it that way.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's appropriate to rush out and supplement left, right, and center for things, because having an excess of one certain nutrient can have actually a depressing effect on other nutrients. So you can throw the whole thing out of balance. Now, of course, if you come up with a symptom of having a specific deficiency, then absolutely, you would be foolish not to try and correct that insufficiency. Mm-hmm. But to take a supplement before any sign of a sufficiency has been shown, you may well be then causing yourself a deficiency in another nutrient that's suppressed by the excessive intake of the one you took. As much as we can, we need to be nurturing our topsoil. Mm-hmm. As much as we can, we need to tune into our body awareness so we recognize deficiency symptoms when they come up. But eating a mainstream diet is not curing the problem of depleted topsoils. The best thing you can include in your diet, and I'm not a person who, by any stretch of the imagination, recommends an exclusively fruit diet. I think vegetables are important to us, our green leafies especially. But if you really are concerned about topsoil problems, go for fruit, because the roots of those fruit trees bypass it completely.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's pretty much covered that. I don't think there's much more to say on that topic, but the next thing you were wanting to mention was menopause and the implications of a raw vegan diet on the menopause. It's not something I'm an expert on myself, so I'll let you speak about that.
It's when I look back and I kind of think, what I've historically done is I've gone through my life's own challenges and just thrashed around with them, like wrestling with an anaconda, until I've somehow found a way forward. And then the primary purpose, actually, other than sort of helping myself out of a difficult situation, has always been to share that with others. Mm-hmm. It just seems to feed me to be able to share things with others, to share my experience. And I'm always very, very honored and incredibly touched and somewhat mystified by the way that other people will sit and listen to what I have to say. I mean, I feel very humbled by that. But it does feed me in that I'm able to share my experiences in ways that are of use to others, that help others, that mean that instead of wrestling an anaconda, they might just sort of roll over a couple of times with a grass snake. So here's my thing about menopause, because that's something that I've been recently passing through. And typical to my modus operandi, I like to do my wrestling and then share. Obviously, because I am of that age, I also have friends, that some of whom I've known for many, many years, who are now also my age, and I've done a lot of note comparing and so on. And some of those friends are on a far different diet than I am. It's pretty much mainstream. And some of those friends are on a very similar diet, and somewhere in between the two. But one thing's really clear, and that is that when you look at menopause, I really like the way it's got the word pause on it. Because it seems to me that it's a pause for you to stop and think, which is really what it's about. It's far more than simply losing your ability to reproduce, personally. It's way, way beyond that. It's an entire change in a woman's life, whereby if she stops and reflects and embraces what she sees in that reflection and works through it in a really positive way, she gets given a beautiful golden key that unlocks the door to somewhere where she will find immense richness of life and some degree of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And an enhanced ability to be of service to others in the community in a way that she never had before. And of course, that wonderful, wonderful older matriarch mothering energy. But if she doesn't do that, if on the other hand she sees menopause simply as something that needs medicating, she's never going to really get the golden key.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to probably have never quite reached her potential this time round if she resists the pause in menopause and tries to continue as normal. Now, I know that some women choose to take HRT, and I know some of them do it because the symptoms are just unbearable. But some women also do it because they want to maintain the youthfulness of their body.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about the menopausal change, as I've said, it's not really about your body. It is to some degree. It's kind of the wrapping that the gift comes up in, but the gift itself is not that. The gift itself is not having to bother with menstruation every month. That's not the gift. The gift is, it is literally a complete shift in your level of awareness on planet Earth. Which sounds grand, but I truly believe it is. And the problem is, in order to get this golden key and make this shift, you need to really stop and stop running. Now, I talked before about having unmet needs, and I think most of us, to some degree or another, to a larger or lesser degree, spend a lot of our lives running, and there's only one person we're running away from, and that's ourselves. And it's that pause in menopause. It allows you to stop the running, turn around, look, and open your eyes and see what you see. Now, this, I have to say, if you're on a mainstream diet, back to what I was saying about the suppression of emotions, you're going to find that on a mainstream diet, your menopause is a completely different experience than if you're on a raw vegan diet. Now, I'm not going to tell you that my menopause is an easy thing. I have found and am finding my menopause one of the greatest challenges of my life. Maybe part of it is because I really wanted to be a mummy about 10 more times over because I'm in love with being a mother. But I think a lot of it is because I'm not drugged up with foods to suppress my emotions. I'm not buying into the mainstream approach to life. I'm absolutely stripping that away till I'm, how can I say, mentally naked. And I'm facing up to everything. And it's really, really, really hard. And I cry and I sob and I go through the stuff. But every now and then through that, I get a glimpse. I get a gleam of where I'm heading and what's the other side of this challenge. And my goodness, it's worth it. And I know that if I was on a mainstream diet, leading a mainstream lifestyle, and I say a lifestyle as well because it's not just about diet, but if I was, I know that I wouldn't have the opportunity that I'm having at this time in my life.
Yep.
It's an opportunity that's horrendously challenging, but one of the most rewarding ever.
Excellent.
So bless all of you darling women out there heading towards this glorious time. Don't buy into the negativity. But I'm not telling you it's easy, but I know you're up to it.
Excellent. Well, a question came in from a friend of mine. He's asked, it's a little bit different from what we've just been speaking about, but he said, do you feel you pay a premium for the lifestyle you choose? I guess that can be interpreted a few ways, but
I so like that question. That is one intelligent question. Okay. Do I pay a premium? Wow. Now then, let me think. Do I pay a premium? Of course I pay a premium. I pay all sorts of premiums. But it depends. You know, if I paid a premium with the money in my bank, it would be a lot more challenging than if I paid a premium with my daughter's Monopoly money. And the premium that I'm paying, I feel, is Monopoly money anyway.
right.
If that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I chose to climb out of the box, so to speak, when I took my first vegetarian option as a child. Because when I was a child, bear in mind that I'm now in my mid-50s, when I was a child, vegetarianism was not common, particularly in my part of the world. And so I became odd, strange, of my own volition at that time. And I have progressively climbed further and further out of the box and isolated myself from certain situations a great deal. But when I look at what I've given up, it's like Francesca said, you know, do you feel you're missing out, darling? Yes, I'm missing out on being poisoned. I think the thing that I will take with me into my old age is the fact that I didn't just float downstream out of control, washed by the masses, but I chose to try and swim for myself, and I tried to question, and I didn't just take things on face value, and I looked deeper into things.
Mm-hmm.
And possibly the greatest price that I've paid is my own emotional pain by opening up my heart so wide to others and to myself, and refusing to in any way play down, negate, numb out my heart and my true feelings about things. Because I have been through tremendous emotional pain in my life. But then I think to myself, if there was no pain in life, how could you ever see the joys?
Mm-hmm.
And if there was no pain in my life, have I really lived, or have I just floated downstream? I don't really feel that I've paid an enormous premium socially.
Mm-hmm.
I've always tried to turn it to my advantage. Yes, people ask me about my diet, they ask me about my lifestyle, they ask me why I'm such a, you know, why I didn't get pregnant until I was 46, for heaven's sake. Why I'm home educating, why I'm just so different from everybody else. And you know what? If I'm in a social situation, that all stuff all makes me really interesting. People want to talk to me.
Right.
They talk about me. I don't really care. I really don't. I long since grew past that one. But it's nice to have people interested in me, nice people asking me all these questions. Nice to be different. So I don't think my premiums have been too big. I think that I'm just unbelievably blessed in so many ways, not least of which, of course, my number one blessing is my daughter, but not least of which is having discovered natural hygiene and the raw vegan diet, because it's such an immensely elegant way to live.
Fantastic. Yeah, just before we finish, we're just coming up to a close. We'll end on your closing vision. Just to remind everyone, if they want to learn some more, Rosalind will be teaching at the UK Fruit Festival, which is an event will be held from the 5th to the 9th of August in Pulborough, West Sussex, in the south of England. And if you want some more information on that, if you'd like to register, there are still some places left, although it is really it's very full at the moment, and there's certain rooms and things that have been fully booked, certain buildings that are fully booked now. So please go to the website fruitfest.co.uk and register. I would recommend register as soon as possible before the prices go up again, and to make sure you've got a space. We'd love to see you there, and Rosalind will be teaching a lot more, and you'll have a lot of more time to teach more. And just to finish off for tonight, what's your closing statement for today, your positive vision for the future that you'd like to share with everyone?
I think, Ronnie, first of all, I would like to sincerely thank anybody and everybody who has sat and listened to me rambling on this evening. I am so honored that you should want to spend your time in my presence and listen to what I have to say. I'm deeply, deeply honored, and I thank you from my heart. I also really hope that maybe I've offered you a little bit of something that inspires you to be bold in your life, to make independent changes, to be different, to be true to your heart song, and to make your life a true artistic creation, painted with the brush of intelligence and your own ability to see how things could be different. And I do have a vision, and it's a vision that I passionately like to share with anyone who's willing to listen, because I truly believe that the more people hold this vision, the more this vision will become manifest. And that vision very simply is, it's a world where absolute love and compassion for all sentient beings is the norm, where decisions are made, action is taken, words are spoken, always with the greatest love and compassion in one's mind and heart. And that if anything, any violation should occur, it will be looked upon with horror, amazement, surprise, as if it's something that's almost unbelievable, just incredulous, that couldn't really happen, and oh my goodness. And deep questioning as to why it's happened and how we can avoid it happening again. Rather than a culture who's reading everyday newspapers so full of violence and hatred and revenge and mental sickness that we have to hide them from our children. I hold that vision for us. I believe in my heart it is true. I believe we're moving towards it. All it takes is change on an individual, private, personal level, because each of us, every single one of us, can be a powerful change for the better if we choose to. Thank you so much for spending time.
Thank you.
Share this vision.
Yep.
And let's all know in our hearts that we're walking towards the dawning of a time in humanity which is very different from the one we experience now. Bless you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rosalind. Thanks for spending the time out of your evening to speak to everyone and address everyone.
You're so
I'm looking forward to seeing you again, learning more from you in the future, and obviously at the Fruit Festival. And if anyone wants to make a response or a comment on this video, to let us know what you thought, and I can pass that on to Rosalind. If you've got anything you'd like to share with her, you can leave a comment below, or you can message me and I can send it on. So we're gonna finish for now, and thanks everyone for watching. And just one last time, fruitfest.co.uk if you want to learn more about the event and learn more. If you've been moved today and you'd wish to learn more and take the next step, it's a great event for doing that. So thank you very much, Rosalind, and we're going to leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you.